Well, episode 4 of Ahsoka left us with a real cliffhanger. With Anakin now appearing in front of Ahsoka in the World Between Worlds, it raises a whole lot of questions. Most primarily, how in the world is he here, and if you ask me, why does he look so weird? So to figure out just what in the world or worlds is going on here, we need to take a closer look at the last few moments of episode 4. We've already established that Ahsoka is indeed in the World Between Worlds, and this isn't really the first time we've seen her in this mysterious plane of existence. In fact, the first time that she was in this realm took place during Rebels when Ezra pulled her out of her fight with Vader. But while Ahsoka being in the World Between Worlds isn't exactly a new phenomenon, what is new is the presence of someone who is supposed to be dead in this realm. We know for a fact that during Anakin's adventures, he never traveled or stepped foot in the World Between Worlds. In fact, the only time he's ever come close to touching anything of such mystical nature would be his time on Mortis, meeting the father, son, and daughter, each embodiments of a different facet of the Force. And Anakin's memory was also wiped following that adventure on Mortis, so he really shouldn't be aware about this place at all. So we've basically established that the Anakin that we see here definitely isn't an Anakin from a different point in time, as that would be somewhat impossible. So just how exactly is Anakin here at this point in time? Well, Star Wars has had a long history of great Jedi going on to become Force ghosts, essentially becoming one with the Force after the Jedi in question has died. And Anakin is no exception. We do see him die at the end of Return of the Jedi and briefly return as a Force ghost during the Ewok celebration scene. But if you pay close attention to the details in the Ahsoka show, it doesn't look like Anakin here is a Force ghost. Considering the fact that Force ghosts tend to have a light blue glow surrounding them, the Anakin that we see here doesn't seem to possess any of those characteristics. Instead, much like Ahsoka, Anakin looks perfectly normal as any other living, breathing human being. Not to mention, the clothes that Anakin wears are very similar to what his ghost version normally wears. In the Return of the Jedi, Anakin is dressed in the traditional Jedi robes, whereas in the Ahsoka show, Anakin is wearing the outfit he wore during the Clone Wars, which really leads me to question whether this Anakin is really a Force ghost in the first place. Now, there are a few possibilities that could account for these differences. For one, Anakin might be dressed in his Clone Wars outfit because that was precisely the last time Ahsoka saw him as Anakin before he turned to the dark side. So it would stand to reason that Anakin might choose to appear before her in a form that is most familiar to Ahsoka. Another explanation that might account for why Anakin isn't glowing in blue is the fact that by being in the World Between Worlds, which is so strongly connected to the Force, Anakin's presence is more easily manifested, whereas in other situations, Force ghosts would appear more bluish due to the distance or stretch needed to manifest their forms in the real world. So this is indeed a possibility, not to mention the fact that Anakin says,
"I didn't expect to see you so soon."
which does lend a lot of credibility to that idea. Basically saying that he didn't expect to see Ahsoka so soon because she isn't about to die of old age anytime soon. But while Anakin being a Force ghost does account for why he might be there meeting Ahsoka in the World Between Worlds, there are some weird discrepancies that we need to talk about. You see, while we can easily explain away why Anakin is dressed differently and why there isn't a blue glow, the one detail that we cannot find a simple explanation for is Anakin's lightsaber. If we zoom into Anakin's lightsaber, we can actually see that the design of his saber is black, silver, black, which really isn't Anakin's usual saber. Anakin's saber is usually this, a mostly silver designed hilt with some black pieces. But the one that we see in the Ahsoka show is so drastically different that it raises a lot of suspicion as to whether this is really Anakin. If Anakin had really chosen to appear before Ahsoka, then surely he would have known what his own saber looked like before manifesting himself in front of his former Padawan, which leads me to conclude that this Anakin isn't the Anakin that we know. If this was merely Anakin's Force ghost, then why did a few notes of Vader's theme play when it all cut to black? The point is, as much as Anakin being a Force ghost would make sense when we look at all the details, something doesn't add up. It's also worth noting that when Anakin speaks for the first time, his voice sounds a little weird. I had initially thought that this was the case because they mixed his animated voice with his live action one, but what if there was more to this story? One possibility that I've seen online is that Anakin might be the Son, the manifestation of the dark side that Anakin and Ahsoka encountered during their brief visit to Mortis. And this would kind of explain why some details about Anakin are wrong. Given that it would be the Son impersonating him, and given that the Son's use of the Force is still quite mysterious and powerful, It would also explain how he managed to access the world between worlds. Not to mention, we also know that the daughter, the light side manifestation of the Force, and someone with a deep connection with Ahsoka following her choice to revive Ahsoka, is also capable of accessing the world between worlds somehow, who is represented by Morai, the bird that follows Ahsoka wherever she goes. When we see Ezra access the world between worlds, the bird was already present within the realm before Ahsoka even accessed it. Not to mention, it was also the illustration of the daughter that opened the portal for Ezra to access the realm. So it has been established that the son, the daughter are all likely equally capable of accessing it by themselves, which would make the son's impersonation of Anakin not entirely implausible. However, I don't think this is the son. For one, the son supposedly died back in Mortis when the father stabbed him, and reintroducing the gods of Mortis into the show this late into the story would be a bit too much information for new audiences to follow. Which is why what I think is happening with Anakin here is that Filoni might be reintroducing a new piece of lore. You see, I don't think Anakin is a Force ghost or the son, but instead what we see here is the manifestation of the duality of Anakin Skywalker. For some reason and somehow, the Anakin that we see here represents both the light and darkness within the character. So not exactly Anakin himself, but almost like the Force's manifestation of the Chosen One's past, essentially the physical manifestation of his actions throughout his life. Based on the color scheme of Anakin's new lightsaber, I would say that it might be an amalgamation of Anakin and Vader's lightsaber. The colors used would certainly fit the look, and it would also explain why we also hear parts of Vader's theme towards the end. Not to mention, introducing this Anakin as a representation of both his light and dark sides of his past would be fitting, as Ahsoka needs to come to terms with what happened with Anakin and his fall to the dark side. Having Ahsoka meet Anakin, who is represented as the physical manifestation of echoes or elements of his past, would not only fit the whole concept of time travel in the world between worlds, but also a clever plot device for Ahsoka to confront her inability to come to terms with what happened with Anakin. But really, unless we know more about it in the next episode, all of this is really speculation. Anyways, what do you think? Let me know in the comments down below. Be sure to like and subscribe, and I will see you in the next one. I'm the Lost Acolyte,
and I have spoken.